We always say in pitches, like, when you hire one of us, you're hiring all of us.
And a lot of people went there and the prices have just gone crazy.
In 20 years, that's never happened to me.
Welcome to the latest episode of Navigating with Bertie Russell. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Matt Lesser and Sophie Smadbeck. Is that right? To the podcast. These are two fabulous brokers from New York, from Leslie Garfield, who we have recently partnered with. And I'm really excited to have you both here.
Thank you for having us. Specifically in New York.
Specifically in New York, and specifically in the house that you are marketing at the moment.
We are marketers.
Thank you for allowing us to host it here. Can you tell us a little bit about the house before we get cracking?
Yeah, sure. So
And where we are?
we are in the West Village. We're in the prime West Village, west of 7th Avenue, which is a divide that if you're selling real estate in the West Village, you know is a premium, being west of 7th to be choice West Village location. This property.
Why is that?
Why is that? It's a great question. I think once you cross over to 7th Avenue, west of 7th Avenue, properties get shorter, a little less dense, lower rise, so more sun. As you can see, the south-facing garden here is pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
Properties are particularly larger in Greenwich Village, which is east of 7th Avenue. A little bit more of the grand mansions are in Greenwich Village. The scale is usually 25 feet wide versus we're in 20. Perhaps a deeper lot, and square footage increases there.
And price is equal there to here? Or you price are expensive here?
Price per square foot is going to be more expensive in the West Village.
Okay.
Some of that derives because smaller square footage will usually have greater price per square foot. But we have seen premium pricing in West Village compared to the Greenwich Village. There's greater demand today in the West Village than in Greenwich, but again, you have buyers looking at both. But the house that we're in particularly was originally a single family home during the Great Depression, was converted into multifamily rental apartments, and in its latest iteration was converted back into a single family house. The owner of the property got renovated, expanded this home into what's now 5,100 square feet. It was originally in the 3,000 square footage, so he pushed back the rear. He went up and excavated below.
It's a cool house.
It's a spectacular home.
Yeah. And Sophie, so as far as I can work out, within your business, you will have areas that you specialize in.
Yes.
And you specialize in a different area?
Yeah, I mostly work on the Upper West Side, which is right off of Central Park, as well as Park Slope in Brooklyn, which we find there's some there's a relationship between the two. It's a similar type of buyer, even though they're geographically very far apart. They're really similar neighborhoods in terms of just the vibe, the type of person. They're both really family friendly, great schools. Park Slope is right off of Prospect Park. Upper West Side is right off of Central Park. So there's just a similar draw.
Yes, I was walking around here last night and I saw lots of kids and families, but you might correct me if I'm wrong, but park-wise, you're not as close to the park here?
No, not at all.
And schools?
There's plenty of schools. We found that the concentration of the clientele who's buying in the West Village has a little bit more of a commute for school than, say, the Upper East, the Upper West, parts of Brooklyn. As far as activities and parks and recreation, the West Side Highway, the Esplanade, which has transformed dramatically over the last 10 years, inside of 10 years, between Chelsea Piers, the High Line, other piers, has really, added value to
the High Line's awesome.
Yeah.
I'd heard a lot about it, but I went I was busy last night. Central Park, dinner here.
Yeah,
That's right. Where'd you go to dinner?
I actually can't remember. We're still a bit jet lagged. So by the time we done, we had a busy day yesterday.
You're packing a lot into a short time. Yeah.
We had a really busy day, and then my wife's with me for the week.
Oh, great.
We cycled from our hotel up around the park.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was going to be roughly the same size as the park we've got. It's nearly 3 times the size. But it was great. And actually, her friend who's here was telling us about all these social media spots. And we then went to a few of them, and there was like an hour-long queue at like 9 p.m. for
nice. While you think about the bagel store that we went to the other day.
Yeah.
Right?
Great bagel. Yeah, everyone,
Welcome to New York.
everyone I speak to has been, everyone who I've told I'm going to New York, all they send me is food
Really?
destinations. And yeah, it's been great.
Well,
I've had some great meals in London.
There's
Yeah.
amazing food in London.
Yeah.
The food in London is brilliant. But people the same here, just love it. Yeah, I've really enjoyed down here. And I mean, it's
For good reason. They all have, next time you're here, you'll focus on a different neighborhood.
where
It's Brooklyn or Upper East or Upper West.
Yeah. But this is a great neighborhood to start with. There's so much
here,
here.
and you showed us around the other day.
Yeah.
I really liked that.
It's a great area.
Quiet, and I could imagine having a family there being.
Where were you guys?
Upper West. Yeah.
It was really nice.
Yeah,
Big
absolutely.
houses, quite quiet.
Yeah.
Right next to the park.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about the like price per square foot value in Central Village versus West Village. When you get uptown, like the value is so much more, I think, because you just get more for your money. They're bigger houses, and people, it's not as prime as the Village, considered as prime. So the price per foot is just so low compared to the Village.
And has that changed over time?
I think it probably has down here more than it has uptown.
That stayed probably similar.
I think it's stayed
Years
pretty
to come.
consistent. Yeah, exactly. I mean, what's consistent about uptown is that it has the school. So I think there is in the park, exactly. So there's always going to be, Riverside Park is also really nice. Yeah. So there's always going to be somewhat of a migration, I think, from downtown, young people, young families moving up to the schools uptown. But
It's cyclical.
yeah.
And then we had a band of Upper East Side clientele selling their homes, coming downtown because they wanted a new vibe, something different. And they lived it for 5-7 years, and then they transitioned back north.
Nice. So you've been doing it for 20 years.
20 years.
How did you come into the business, the industry? What's your journey been like?
I grew up in Manhattan.
Okay.
Never thought I'd leave. Left for 4 years for college. My senior year in college, I was sifting through career services and figuring out, I knew I wanted to come back to the city. I had dabbled in real estate a bit with family friends. And Jed, my senior partner, went to the same university as I, 20 years apart. But I ended up meeting with him and Rick. My senior year of college, came for an interview. They offered me a job. I ended up staying in college for that summer, started September 2005, really working with under Jed, learning mentorship, which is kind of how our business the firm really operates.
Yeah.
And was groomed, so to speak, and off to the races. The business when I started was fairly familial. There's Jed and some cousins and his father, and it was probably 8 or 9 people. Now we're roughly 20. And we've grown deliberately, not just to grow as our competitors have grown to hundreds and thousands of agents. We are specialists. So it's been a great place to work. Haven't, had interest in pivoting ever, because we run a great company.
Yeah. What's it like? Our business has also gone from that sort of familial 7 or 8 people up to bigger numbers. And I think for us, hiring new people when you joined was actually quite difficult, because I remember sitting in our boardroom and it was me, my dad, and my brother interviewing someone. And I think that in their mind, they were like, what's it actually going to be like working with a family? Did you have that concern?
Not at all.
No.
I mean, maybe it was just too young to think about those types of things.
Yeah.
I just saw opportunity and good people. And I think that's hopefully what the more recent people that we've hired have thought. And I think it's true. I mean, we run a pretty family friendly type environment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So I think a lot of those morals, those ethics, things like that have continued. And there's always change, right? And there's personality specifically in a sales business, right? It's very hard. It's very hard to hire. It's hard to hire good people. It's hard to hire good salespeople. And sometimes you just don't know until you experience.
Yeah. I think for us, I think where I'm so excited about partnering with you guys and your company is the value, the sort of integrity, and the, you touched on it there. I've spoken a lot to Jed about it. And I think I think that's why it's hard to for us. That's why it's hard to hire, because I mean it's difficult to find good salespeople, but it's really difficult to find good salespeople that also have the same alignment of values. And they're not. I'm not saying they're the best values or the right values, but for us, that's what makes it enjoyable to come to work. And I think long term, that's why we get business and people like working with us. And I can see that really clearly.
Definitely. It's such a cutthroat business. And I think it's sometimes hard when agents come from another company to our company, only because they got used to kind of having to cover up their work and not be able to share and in like camaraderie with their colleagues in a way that we can, because of how our company is designed. And yeah, I mean that
Do you think that's design, or do you think it's design, or do you think there's just a cultural value set?
I think it's both.
Combination.
I think it's both. I mean, we are, it's a great group. It's all good people with good values, and integrity and honesty is a big part of how we run our business, for sure. But I think it also is just in the nature of how the company is designed, in that we divide up the neighborhood or the city by neighborhood and specialize in that neighborhood. So we're not competing with one another. We're not just, fighting for business it's a free for all. We focus on our area. We get to know that area the best. And I think that allows, we always say in pitches, like when you hire one of us, you're hiring all of us.
And so here people are, regardless of what their expertise in, if they get a referral or they win some business, one end of Manhattan or the other, they'll take it on and might not quite know.
We try to be like the best at everything, right? We know what we know. We're happy to refer things out to, as we spoke about before, to people in the real estate community that do things better than us at certain submarkets. The market was always just also very black and white, right? A buyer was only looking in one particular neighborhood. Over the last 10, 12 years, that's changed a lot. Like an Upper East Side buyer might actually be looking on the Upper West Side, or might even be looking in the West Village. And so the benefits of having a neighborhood expert within the office, we have communal meetings and we say, well, this person's shopping for X, Y, and Z. Do you have anything? And it just so happens that the buyer who was for months was just looking in one neighborhood is now pivoting to another, and we were able to collaborate together. We've seen that a lot in Brooklyn. Brooklyn Heights was the submarket that people were only looking to. Now, because of transportation and Uber and et cetera, and city bikes, people are looking in Park Slope and Carroll Gardens and Cobble Hill, et cetera. So it's,
you were saying post-COVID that was a
for sure. Yeah, and in Brooklyn is really special, and it's very low rise, less dense. And so certainly during COVID, people, Brooklyn was almost like the hybrid of leaving, going to the suburbs and staying in the city. And it was this great little middle ground for people.
It sounds great.
It's great.
Looking forward to that.
And then the retail has transformed dramatically. So the restaurant, some of the top restaurants, we talk about social media and ratings, like top restaurants are in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
Really. And so over your 20 years, have you seen, so you started with Jed.
Mm-hmm.
That must have been quite fun.
Always an adventure.
And have you seen, I mean, I'm constantly trying to understand which areas are similar to the areas that we have back in London.
Yeah. It's a great comparison.
And we've had some big changes in the last 5 to 10 years, where Notting Hill was always quite a cool place, but it was much cheaper. It was half the price of Belgravia or Chelsea. And we would get some people, because of budget and maybe because of schools, they'd go up there. But around COVID as well, they've got bigger gardens, they're lower rise, and a lot of people went there, and the prices have just gone crazy. And have you noticed that over your 20 years? Have you noticed like so you focus on West Village, right?
Yeah, I mean, so downtown was like our market. When I started the company, it was really shadowing Jed, who was mostly Upper East Side. But then as a firm, we decided that we needed greater presence downtown. So I started in the Gramercy, Chelsea area, which are special in their own right, not a huge housing stock compared to other neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So as I kind of cultivated Gramercy, then felt, we needed growth. So we pivoted a little bit further west to Chelsea, and then over time have focused on the West Village. But I think what you're getting at is we've seen dramatic shifts specifically in value and demand, West Village and Brooklyn. I mean, if you look at data and spreadsheets, you'll see spikes much greater in those two neighborhoods than on the Upper East Side from a value perspective.
I think the Upper West Side benefited from it too, a little bit because of that value we talked about. Like people, there was a big conversion market in like 2020, 2021. People would buy multifamilies and gut them and convert them to single families, which isn't happening as much anymore because of the construction costs. But people saw an opportunity, I think, during COVID to get all this space for what's, was a great value and have your own outdoor space, be close to the park, which again, during COVID, that was huge. So yeah, I think those neighborhoods with like access to those kinds of things benefited a lot.
It's really interesting having it. I haven't been doing 20 years, I've been doing 16 years, but with a little bit of experience to be able to see how demand has changed and how areas have developed and popularity is just, what people have wanted. I mean, England, London was quite a formal, there are some quite formal houses where people used to have, and this is probably a bit before my time, but when I started, it was still a bit happening. In these smart houses, there were a lot of butlers and there was lots of help, and dinners would happen very formally in a sort of separate dining room. And then there would be a really smart parlor level, which we call a drawing room, and they'd never be seen in the kitchen.
Right.
Whereas we've had a bit of a generational shift where the people in their 30s and 40s, regardless of wealth, they will be cooking at their, open plan kitchen, going onto the garden. And there are parts of London that the architecture didn't suit that. So COVID also didn't have it, sort of sped it along. But because of the way that people have lived, those areas have become more popular. And it's really interesting. I suspect it will just, now those places have become so expensive that people are coming back to these other places that were originally much stronger and more expensive.
Was there a big suburban shift in London during that time or not so much?
There was. So the area where we work, London is just vast.
Right.
And we cover a relatively small patch in London. We have our park, Hyde Park, is the sort of central point of our business. And around that are probably the most highly valued properties: Mayfair, Knightsbridge, Chelsea, Kensington, Notting Hill, Bayswater. And outside of those areas were people, more normal people, people that had to get mortgages, had to sell a property to buy a new one, which is not typically what we deal with. A lot of those people were finding they could work from home more often, and for what they could sell their property for in London, they could buy a house double the size in the country or in sort of suburban areas. The clients that we were dealing with, we were worried they'd be doing that, but actually they ended up buying bigger houses in London and homes in the country.
Yeah.
And I think what we found that was fascinating is the amount of wealth is just, I'm astounded by it every day. But during COVID, I think people realized that life is short, and we found a lot of parents gifting money to kids. So we'd find 25, 35-year-old kids with £10 million budgets coming to, go and live your life. Life could be short. So we found people buying bigger homes, renting out their old homes, and buying places in the countryside.
Wow.
But we found apartments were dead. And there was a huge apartment culture, particularly for international buyers and for people downsizing. They were really, really expensive before COVID, and they dropped off the cliff.
Yeah.
Now we're back to a bit more of a normal pace, but it's fascinating.
You also have a good segment of buyer pools that non-primary, right? Yeah, and I know stamp duty and tax has probably affected that, but
yeah, we have a very diverse group of clients and buyers, landlords and tenants. Still a lot of English, very depending on area, and that's why I'm fascinated about here and the types of buyers that buy in different places. But there's still a lot of buyers that come from finance, and off the back of that, we have a lot of people coming from New York from the finance. We have quite a lot of sort of tech and movie people coming from California, but we have a lot of people from the East. We have a lot of people from India. We have a lot of people from the Middle East. The Middle East is. Do you have a lot of Middle Eastern buyers here?
They have The answer is yes, but the concentration of, I think, their purchases have been to the new development, midtown
Yes.
billionaire,
Yeah.
segment. We have a foreign buyer pool, but the reality is that if you look at, the majority of our buyers are local.
Yeah.
Certainly domestic. But the West, everywhere, as you say, like the concentration of wealth, it's astonishing every day. Like, yes, it's always been finance driven, hedge funds, private equity, venture capital, bankers. And again, then attorneys step in. And when I started, it was doctors and attorneys. That's who was buying and selling these homes. It's shifted, the entertainment market, the tech market, like that has all come into New York quite strong.
We found bankers, but they were, probably a bit before my time, but they were our main market.
Yeah.
And actually, since private equity, hedge funds, tech, entertainment, people are making so much money on social media, which just baffles me.
I know.
But that's been a really interesting.
Isn't that why we're here?
Okay. Yeah, we're back giving you some fun on social media. Yeah, it's been interesting. Sophie, how did your career start?
My family, I have a family history of real estate. So my father's in the real estate business. His father was in the real estate business. My dad is still in commercial real estate. But I saw the job posting and I was looking for jobs my senior year, and I recognized the name Leslie Garfield because I thought I'd heard my dad mention it over the years, and I called him and asked about it, and just a great fit from the start. I worked closely with Rick, and yeah, that was the rest is history. That was how I got into it. My dad and I do overlap a little bit.
Yeah, you were telling me.
Yeah, and
how is that?
It's great. He has fun with it. We both do. It's there's really never been a situation that has gotten like awkward. But there have definitely, there have been times where we would like call him up to show a buyer one of his houses, and he's like, I know that guy. Like, no, we can't bring him here. Like that kind of thing. But for the most part, it's just fun. We can talk about it at the dinner table and what's going on in the market, and he definitely gets a kick out of it. We have done a deal together, which was great. I brought a buyer to one of his properties on the Upper West Side.
Do you see a different part of him?
It's cool. It's cool to see that side of him. He's so great at, like, his skill set is mostly with just dealing with people. And it's cool to see that side of him and how much his colleagues respect him and how great he is at managing a deal. And so yeah, it definitely it was cool to go through that deal process.
It's somewhat unique. right? There's
I've had
you hear mostly the opposite,
Right.
Don't go into the family business and this and that. But no, it's great. It was amazing to see Jed and Leslie, and I worked with Leslie till he passed, multiple years ago. But there was a certain dynamic between the two of them, but you also saw the respect and Jen's respect for Leslie and how much he learned from Leslie. And then we kind of we pass it on, right? How much I learned from Jed and Rick, and, the younger generation learns from us. And that's kind of the culture that we design. And it's clearly the culture that you try to cultivate as well.
Yeah. And actually, I had a really nice chat with Rick at dinner the other night, and he said he loves the industry, but actually he loves the part of the business where he's working with you and other younger people, and trying to share some of the stuff that he knows and trying to help people develop and learn.
Yeah.
And I think that's so really, the people part of our job is really fun.
It's rewarding, yeah.
That is also internal thing as well. It's external, you're dealing with clients and buyers, but also internally working with people in a nice environment.
Yeah. Rick is particularly great at that mentorship piece, absolutely. But everyone at our company is. It's really something that makes us unique, I think.
How have you, so this is something I think my kids are a bit younger than yours, but this is something I'm seriously struggling with, is how to balance being on all the time and being involved in business and loving it. I love it. I can tell immediately, without even speaking to you, I can see you love what you do. How do you balance relationship with your wife and kids and trying to give them loads and trying to give work loads? How do you got any magical secrets?
The secrets. Look, you have to shut down at a point, right? And you just it's not fair to anyone, yourself included. But I think my family, my wife is very forgiving of me needing to take a random phone call at who knows what time. And I really try to focus on kids' activities, and the weekends in particular, they're very active. So, being present. The weekdays are obviously a bit more challenging, but I really try to see them first thing in the morning and certainly before they go to bed, which when we moved to the suburbs became a little bit more challenging, but close enough that, I try to get home at reasonable hours. But yeah, they go to bed. I get on my computer. I get on a phone call. And often I just look, as you get a little bit more seasoned in the industry, you try to work it out with your clients and your prospective clients that, you say no sometimes. Right. And that's,
But you do need a bit of time before you can do that, don't you? You need a bit of experience.
Certainly earlier on, it was a yes, no problem, no problem. And there's power in saying no. Plenty of people have said that. And look, the reality is, if I need to be available, we're available. And the other beauty of creating teams and working for a company and where there's so much collaboration is you can rely on other people. And we try to make sure that everyone at the company or everyone on your particular team knows everything about every deal that you're working on. So no one's in the dark. And so I can say to a client, can you talk to Tori, or can you talk to whomever at this particular time? And I'll be back to you. And we're always in the know. It's just a matter of, can I deal with it at that second? But it's hard. Right? Kids are now 9 and 12, so I go to sleep later. So I can, so it creates a little bit more time in the day. But you'll see, there's other
stuff to come.
I have two girls, so
okay.
I have emotional roller coaster. I'm a lone ranger in my household.
Yeah, I've got 2 boys, 5 and 4, and then a girl. And the 2 boys are so physical.
Oh yeah.
Just
as if you were any different.
Yeah, we're 5 boys and 1 girl, so poor man. It's the greatest thing that ever happens. Like, for me, it's been the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, but it's also one of the greatest challenges. And I think I hope it makes me a better person at work and at home and everywhere. And I think that, a lot of what we're doing at work is, you're dealing with other people's feelings, you're dealing with other families. I've found actually a lot of clients and buyers, they've got their own kids, they respect the fact that you've got a sports game or even bath time. 2 years ago, I lost 3 transactions when buyers or other agents were trying to call me during bath time. And I had a rule where I was like, I'm on all the time, but not between 6:30 and 7.
Yeah, it's pretty sad that we need instant satisfaction.
Yeah.
Look, it's also part of how the market has shifted for us, right? As Sophie was alluding to, renovations. They take this house that we're sitting in was a 4-year project. COVID slowed it down a bit.
Yeah.
But the benefit is that you can create value often by doing the renovation and getting what you ultimately want, but you have to wait for it. And the city agencies and the bureaucracies, it's a really tough assignment.
Yeah.
It's absolutely not for most people. And so the premium has been attributed to finished product at this point. And I'm sure your market has seen that also.
But only recently, because the cost and the time frame has only really gone up post-COVID. And it is taking a long time. And I think, again, we go back to kids, if those years with your kids are so valuable. And if 4 or 5 years are spent in a rental where you feel, and there's some great rentals out there, but you might not feel completely comfortable there, or not a bit too small, or it might not be your design, of course there's a premium.
Yeah.
We sold something last year for a big premium, and buyer completely knew they were paying premium, but he was like, I've got the money. My kids are 4 and 5. I don't want to be 10. I don't want them to be 10 by the time they've moved into this spectacular house. That there are quite a few streets where these spectacular houses are, where they are generational.
Right.
People live in them for 40 to 50 years. And he's like, it was right in the middle of a garden square, views at the back across 1 acre, 2 acres of open green space. And he was like, this doesn't come up.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, he ended up, I think we had it on for 33, and he was the first person through the door, and he said, I'll pay 35 to take it off the market. And we closed it down, and we spoke yesterday about how it all works. And when there's real competition, people can close stuff down super quick. And for that one, in England, there's all of our terminology is a bit different, but it was a freehold house, not a co-op,
Right.
and you could buy it in a day.
Right, so the exchange is one day.
Yeah. The lawyers, you get your lawyers in the same, nowadays you have to sit in the same office, but my dad tells a great story about how he showed this lady a house and she said, I want to buy it. And he's like, okay, well, get in my car. He drove over to her lawyer, picked him up, put him in the back of his car. They drove to the seller's lawyer and they sat there for 4 hours and it was done. It's like buying a handbag. I've only ever heard that. I mean, we've done a few. So in England, they're called attended exchanges.
Okay.
They only tend to happen in our area because people have enough money in their bank account to pay the 10% deposit like that. So one we did about 4 years ago was 10 million. No, it was 14 million. The deposit would have been 1.4 million. And she called up and said, I'm really sorry, I've only got 1.2 in the bank in my current account. Will that be enough? We're like, yeah, that'll be fine. And yeah, it was extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, the fastest deal that I think I've been a part of was so here we have it's called a 1031 exchange. It's part of the tax code, which allows you to defer capital gains on an asset. And a client has already sold something and you have a 45-day window to determine what you're going to exchange into. And she had 2 days left.
Wow.
She bought something and closed within 2 days. And so that was, it was I think a $6 or $7 million townhouse transaction, but that was the fastest deal that we've. Yeah.
I suppose, and different markets, sometimes they take a lot longer because there's less pressure on the buyer and they dot every I and cross every T. How the markets are like, we have a similar market at the moment. It's more of a buyer's market at the moment. Hopefully when this actually gets aired, we might be
shifting
past that a little bit. But yeah, we've had 5 or 6 best bid situations where we've had multiple people bidding on properties, and comes down to when the prices gets down to the right level,
right?
Irrespective of what's happening outside,
because they're so efficient.
Yeah, they're so efficient.
How much of your business is representing purchasers versus sellers?
So we only really represent sellers and landlords. We're not allowed to represent both sides. So if we're instructed, if we have a contract from the seller or the landlord, we are not allowed to take money and represent the other side. So in London, we have separate businesses that represent the buyers.
Right.
And they get a fee paid by the buyer.
Directly from the purchaser.
So we get paid directly from the purchaser.
Yeah.
We interact a lot with buyers. I think as you get higher in the market on the price level, more and more of them will instruct a buying agent to act on their behalf. But under 5 million, very few people do. And so they will come to us direct from our marketing or from word of mouth. And we're not acting on behalf of the buyer, but we're trying to help them understand the process. And
but your fiduciary is to your client, who's the seller.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, our market has certainly shifted over the last 6, 8 months, 12 months to that same structure. Where's your fee typically on the buy side?
The buy side actually seems to be more
Really?
than the sell side, which I was surprised about.
Yeah.
It's
Why
really
that?
I mean, 10 years ago, there were probably a handful of buying agents.
Right.
I mean, tiny amount compared to hundreds of selling agents. 20 years ago, it didn't exist at all. And it's become more and more competitive, but there's probably more competition on the sell side than there is on the buy side.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's maybe technology, right? I mean, if you think about it, what's the value of the buy side agent? Knowing the market, knowing the value, but also being able to offer things that people in the general public can't see, right? So a lot of our buy side transactions happen off market.
Yeah.
Which I know your transactions happen, or a handful of your transactions happen off market.
With high degree.
Yeah, of course. I mean, with technology, right? Everything's at your fingertips. So for the most part, the majority of the inventory is public.
Yeah.
And so some buyers feel like, okay, well, I'll just go direct, and that's fine, right? But in many of those instances, they're not sophisticated enough to know the real value. And so they need help. They might not.
It's very important. I mean, having a buying agent is a fantastic thing for the buyer, and it's a fantastic thing for us and the seller.
Yeah.
Because they're so prepared legally, financially. We've got some regulations hoops they've got to jump through. It's become more and more complicated.
Yeah.
And there are lots of pitfalls that can pop up if you're not aware of them. I mean, my dad used a buying agent to buy the properties he's bought, and he really knows what he's doing. But
create a buffer
between
the two parties.
get some experience. You know, what we realize is we know a lot about the areas we work in, like you do. And as soon as you step a street out,
Exactly.
you have
Yeah.
an idea.
And you,
Yeah, I bought my home in a market that I know nothing about, and I used an agent.
Yeah.
You have to.
You have to. Before we go, I'd love to hear if you have one memorable transaction. Is there one that stands out, as pops out at you?
I mean, as I'm sitting here, so the house that we're in right now, so when you, in New York, when you transact on a home, you sign a contract and you put up a 10% deposit. Our asking price on this house is $22.5 million, right? So 10% over $2 million. Buyer signed contract, went to contract. We went out of contract because the purchaser elected that they no longer wanted to purchase the home. I won't talk about the end result, but it was memorable in the sense, one, we're sitting here, but two, in 20 years, that's never happened to me. So a deal broke, and we then had to put the asset back on the market. So it's memorable in the fact that, like, you're never done until you're done.
Every day you learn something new.
Absolutely.
And you said
it's 20 years later, right? Like, and that's also the beauty of our business, right? Is you're learning something new, you're meeting someone new every single day.
And it keeps evolving.
Yeah.
How about you?
A recent one was actually on the buy side. That was interesting just because it's a buyer we had worked with or shown properties to for maybe 5 years, like over the course of that long, on and off. And I mean, after that long, you start to think like he's never going to buy anything. But it's a good lesson to stay on someone, stay in touch, keep them in mind, and keep sending them properties, because in the like few months before he ended up buying something, he kind of ramped up the search. And as like the minute we saw this house come on, I was like, that's the one. We have to send it right to him. Get him in there tomorrow. Like he was like, and to his credit, like as slow as he had moved on everything over several years, he saw this and was like, get me in there. I want that house. Basically put in an offer before we even saw it. Which their seller's agent actually was like, don't do that. Come see it. Like they aren't going to take it seriously. And yeah, we ended up, I mean, it was a really good deal for the house. It's an Upper West Side townhouse right off Central Park on 71st Street. And because we had gotten in there that quickly, we were able to get it done and beat out a lot of interested buyers. And yeah, it was rewarding after that long to work with him on that one.
I think it's a great lesson that I think a lot of people come into this industry thinking you're going to be able to, something's going to happen immediately.
Yeah.
And this job is all about patience and longer relationships over a long time.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, I mean, I could say something similar. Like I showed a rental to someone $10,000 a month. They probably wouldn't even remember where they met me. It ultimately led to a rental, then to a $10 million sale, and then to a $55 million sale.
Wow.
Over a course of over 10 years. But yeah, you just have to just think about this as a long game.
Yeah.
What was your most memorable?
I had this interview yesterday with your marketing team, so I've answered it yesterday. That's where this question came from. I think it was probably the second transaction I ever did, and my dad let me loose on some far too big fancy properties at 21, and it was a £9 million transaction, and the owner was someone my dad had known for 30 years. His sister had lived with her as a student, and she ended up marrying someone who was the head of a massive company, and she was wild. She's a great lady. And the buyer was also very high profile financier, and they couldn't be more different. But with the first viewing, she was shouting down the stairs saying, "Don't let him in, he's not coming in." And she was having her hair done upstairs. And so I had to go up and say, "I'm really sorry, but we've been waiting 3 weeks for this guy to come." And he came in, and they're still friends. And
Wow.
and he uses her personal assistant and uses her housekeeper that was there for years. And so those quirky little funny relationships and parts of people that probably I remember the most.
We're not just real estate brokers, we're psychiatrists, psychologists.
Yeah.
All of the what at you know, the only thing that came to mind that I didn't ask, you were talking about family. Do you see your kids coming into the business? And I know they're quite young.
Jed asked me the same question. I would love them to come to business,
Yeah.
but I hope they didn't hear me say that. I hope that they
choose that.
Come to it
choose their own
themselves.
path.
Yeah.
I hope that I instill the values that we love, so the integrity and honesty and hard work.
Yeah.
And I hope that they're happy doing whatever they want to do. But I would love them.
So diplomatic of you.
Well, I hope that everyone. I mean, one of my brothers hasn't joined the business, and I'm
Right.
so happy for him.
Yeah.
I would love him to be in the business, but he's found his own path and he's happy and
Great.
couldn't be happier.
Okay.
Thank you both so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Awesome.